I already went live. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Things opened up here. Very well. I thought today we could continue a little bit, kind of continue the teaching from last Sunday, at least in kind of the spirit of it, and that was looking at the offensiveness of the doctrine of Christ. Because, I'm going to move this. Remember, if anyone wants to contribute or ask a question or have a comment, grab a microphone. You don't have to walk up there. You can just grab it and take it with you to your seat and hold it. Nobody's going to get upset. We got lots of these. We got more in the back. So if you feel you want to participate, just grab a microphone and just keep it with you, and that way you'll be ready to chime in whenever you want. Also, finally, somebody made a Bible software application that works properly. At least it works the way I would have made it if I had made it. It's wonderful. Finally, you can find it on our Freeborn Church website. There's one that you can search and use called Bible.freebornchurch, and one just for reading called Read.freebornchurch. And so if you want to look at those, you can. Anyways, now moving on to what we're talking about. So last week Mike taught on the passage of Luke 7, I believe, right? Where the adulterous woman, or the prostitute woman, is what it seems like she was. She's weeping on the feet of Jesus and everything, and the Pharisee is offended that Christ would allow such a person to touch him, and only thing he can figure is he must not really be a prophet. I must have read him wrong. I thought he was a prophet, but if he was a prophet, he would know who she was, what kind of woman she was, and there's no way a prophet would let such a person like that touch him. And then Jesus tells them the parable of who loves the Lord more, the debtor forgiven a little or the debtor who's forgiven a lot. And the obvious answer to that question is who was forgiven more would love him more. And Jesus says, you've judged right. So she loves me more. And we can see that by their deeds, because she's wept over me, she's anointed me, and you never did any of those things. And so she loved me more. And I was having conversation with some people after church who were very offended, not with Mike, but with the whole concept of this story. And if anyone who's been saved very young, and you don't have this glowing testimony, right? You can't say, sex, drugs, alcohol, and then I turned 6 and got saved, right? You don't have that amazing testimony. Well, then you think, then what Jesus is saying is that I can't love him the way somebody who's lived a terrible life can love him. And so people are uncomfortable, some people are uncomfortable with that doctrine. Well, first off, I think that's exactly what it says. And so if you don't like it, I'm sorry. A little bit. Well, not really. I say I'm sorry because I want to seem empathetic. I'm not sorry at all. Not at all. In fact, there are a tremendous amount of things in the ministry of Christ that are going to offend you if that offends you. If that offends you, then get ready to be offended, because Christ was incredibly offensive. Incredibly offensive. Christ said something. We'll look at this in Luke. In Luke chapter 7, and we'll look at verse 23. It's a little different context, but he makes a statement that I thought we could just consider going forward. Luke 7:23 says, "And blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me." This is a little different context, but the statement, I think, is very important. That Christ says that we're blessed if we're not offended in him. I think Christ, in fact, I know Christ was very aware that what he taught was offensive. His doctrines were offensive. Now, we could look at a number of them that are offensive to most people, non-believers. For instance, when Christ taught on hell, that's very offensive to some people, to a lot of people. But it's not offensive to Christians. It shouldn't be. Right? If the basic doctrines of Christ are offensive to you, then you need to examine whether or not you're even in the faith. When Christ says, I and the Father are one, that's very offensive to Muslims. That's offensive to Jehovah's Witnesses. That's offensive to non-believers. But if you're a Christian, that shouldn't offend you at all. Right? So if Christ's saying, I and the Father are one, if that offends you, you need to re-examine your faith. These are basic tenets of Christianity. You can't have Christianity without them. There's a movement in America today, somewhat gathering steam, of people who want to be Christians but don't want to subscribe to the orthodox Christian doctrines. That Jesus Christ was a real person, that he was God manifest in the flesh, that there's a hell, that Christ died on the cross. You can't be a Christian if you don't believe those things. You're not a Christian. Right? You're just calling yourself a Christian. All right? So, those are not the ones I think are offensive, not to Christians, but there are doctrines that Christ taught that were very offensive to believers. Let's look at one just right off the bat, and let's look at John chapter 6, verse 53. John chapter 6, and we'll look at verse 53. And this is where Jesus says unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except ye eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, ye have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. Now that was a very offensive teaching of Christ. When he taught this, he lost maybe 90% of his followers. Just said, that's it. That's the last straw. This isn't something this is crazy talk. He's saying we have to eat his flesh. We have to drink his blood. What kind of crazy pagan ritual is he going to be instituting here? So that was a no-go for many, many believers. And surely you can look at this and realize why this would be difficult, especially if you don't have the benefit of the explanation later on. And Christ didn't do hardly anything to mitigate that offense. In fact, when everyone started leaving, he looks over at his disciples, the apostles, and says, do you want to leave too? And what's funny is they don't say no. They basically say yes, in the form of saying, we have nowhere to go. We would if we could, right? That's what they're saying. Very politically, very diplomatically, they're saying, absolutely we want to go. This is crazy talk. This is crazy talk. So right here we have an example, a very good example of Christ not only being very offensive, but being offensive to believers and doing almost nothing to diminish that offense. So what I want you to understand first this morning is that Christ has no interest in not offending you today. None whatsoever. None whatsoever. He does not care about your feelings. Now that doesn't jive with the Christ that many Christians want to trust or believe in. They want to believe in a Christ who is very concerned about how they feel about things and how things make them feel. But we do not find on this fact. Christ didn't care about their feelings, anybody's. He cared about what was real and what was true. That's what he cared about. He believed that if you could know the truth would set you free. And that's what mattered. And you feeling good at the time had no bearing whatsoever on anything real. And too many Christians, sadly, hopefully none of you, but too many Christians, sadly, think that how they feel about things matters. Not realizing in their own logic that their feelings go up and down all the time and reality never changes because of it. But they think the way they feel about things is very important. Christ says, no, actually not very important at all. In fact, there are many things that you as a Christian need to be offended about. Why is that? Because Christ was dealing with a certain reality specifically, and that's the reality of the kingdom. There is a kingdom that Christ is going to institute. He is going to bring it down. He is going to found it on earth, and He is going to rule in that kingdom. That's a reality. Now, many people don't think it. Many people think it's delusional. We'll see, right? We'll see. But if Christ is true and what He said He was is real, then He said, He warned, He is coming back no longer as a suffering lamb, but as a reigning lion. He's going to set up a kingdom. He's going to sit on a throne that's going to be in Jerusalem, and He's going to rule the earth, and that kingdom will be nothing like any kingdom before it. Nothing like it. Whatever you know to be true in politic America is not true in the kingdom of Christ. So right now, you got all your knowledge about how the government works. Well, some of us, some of you, right? How the government works, what the legislative branch is, what the executive branch is, and you know who's not living up to the Constitution, and you got it all figured out. And that's good, but it has no meaning whatsoever in the kingdom of Christ. There will be no democracy in His kingdom. There will be no socialism. There will be extremely little capitalism, if any. If any. Because capitalism gets destroyed with charity. It can't live. Capitalism only can survive under egotism. That's just how it works. That's another subject. So don't get me on to that subject because I like that subject. So anyways, all of these things that you think you know, that you have figured out and are very important right now. I'm not trying to diminish their importance at this moment. Right now, knowing these things, that's important. I think all Christians should be knowledgeable on these things. But you need to understand that the moment Christ establishes His kingdom on earth, all of the things you knew are absolutely zero. This is why Christ warns us that we ought to be very careful how we are storing up for that time. A lot of times we think of that as merely used as like giving offerings, and certainly that plays a part in what He's talking about, but there's a whole lot more depth to what He's warning us about. That we don't want to be those who reach the kingdom of Christ, and we have prepared ourselves to have a kingdom of this earth, and we are not prepared at all. Not mentally, not spiritually, in no way prepared to live in a kingdom that is unlike anything you know right now. So when we look at the teachings of Christ, like the one exemplified in Luke chapter 7, what we are seeing is Christ explaining to us how the kingdom works. And what we find when we start looking, when I personally look at the teachings of Christ where He talks about how the kingdom works, I become very offended because it doesn't work the way I think it ought to work. Does not work. And you know what the Pharisees found out? The Pharisees discovered it didn't work the way they thought it should work either. Everybody was offended at this. And it is offensive. And if you want to pretend it isn't, it's because you're not being honest with yourself. Because everything you know, everything you think is upside down. Imagine that the kingdom comes, and let's just paint it from physically. And when the kingdom comes, everything just gets turned. The whole physical world gets turned upside down. What's up is down, what's down is up, what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right. Everything physically just gets flipped upside down. You've prepared your whole life to live in a right side up world, and now you have to navigate an upside down world. That is the picture that Christ painted. In fact, in almost that many words. That when He comes, He is going to flip everything over. You say, where would He say such a thing? Remember when He says, the first will be last, and the last will be first? Everything's getting flipped. And there's going to be a lot of people completely out of their element. And they're going to be as offended in His kingdom as a fish is offended in air and a bird in water. They're going to be totally out of their element. And I think that one of the things that Christ is telling us in these teachings is He is preparing us so that we can get offended now and then make our peace with it, right? We can go through all the stages of grief, right? And then reach finally acceptance. That's where we need to be. I feel many Christians are going to go through the stages of grief in the kingdom. They'll get there and be astounded, offended, uncomfortable. They may not even like it. You would think, why would somebody not like it? You read about the benefits of the kingdom and you think, well, who wouldn't want that? There's going to be no sin. There's going to be no crime. Even unbelievers are going to live good lives. You're going to live hundreds of years. Who wouldn't want this? This sounds wonderful. There's going to be a lot of people who want nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with it. I feel the same way whenever I counsel people who are having relationship strife, whether it be strife with their marriage or with their children or with their neighbor. And I tell them there's a world in which there's no strife. I don't mean some future world, ethereal world. I mean, there's a world right now. You can have a life where you don't have this strife. They don't want it. They don't want it. You think, why would somebody not want that? I don't know. But all of us, choose daily to not want something that's actually pretty good. And that's what we find when Christ is teaching about the kingdom. He's explaining something that is truly magnificent, wonderful, and people are offended with it. So let's look at a few of these examples, other than the one we looked at in John 6. Let's look at, for instance, Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20. We're just going to go through some of these. Start reading in verse 1. This one is extremely offensive. This one is particularly offensive to Americans. Americans, they would like to excise this right from the Bible. For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, I wish I could find those guys, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, I'll give you. And they went their way. Again he went out about the 6th and 9th hour, and did likewise. They worked 12-hour days there. I really wish I could find these guys. And did likewise. And about the 11th hour, he went out. So 1 hour before quitting time, he goes out, and he found others standing idle. And he said unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They said unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that ye shall receive. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard said unto his steward, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. All right, so you see what's happened. It's real simple, right? He has a vineyard. He needs it to be harvested. He hires people at the beginning, says, I'll pay you a penny a day. They come to an agreement. Done. That's going to be the day's salary. It was probably the standard salary of the day. And so he's like, I'll give you a day's wages if you go work a day. Great, they have work. And then as the day progresses, he goes out multiple times, all the way up until the final hour of the day, and he hires more people. And with them, his agreement is, I'll give you, what does he say? Sorry. I'll give you what is right. That's how he phrases it. I'll give you what is right. They say, that sounds good to us. So they go work. Right? And at the end of the day, as all harvest is done, he says, okay, line them all up. Start with the ones who work the least amount of time. Pay them first, and pay the ones who work the most amount of time last. That's how we're going to do it. So that's what they do. So it says in verse 9, and when they came that were hired of, I skipped some. Call the laborers and first, last and first. Oh no, that's right. And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. The same amount that he said he was going to pay the people he worked all day. So just imagine you're in the line. I worked 1 hour and you worked 12 hours, Leanne. 12 hours. And you're looking up at the line, and you see, first of all, I'm getting it first. That ought to just really rankle you right there, right? It's like, really? I've been working 12 hours, and they're going to pay him first? Really? That doesn't seem fair right off the bat. But then he gives me a penny. The same amount he promised to give you. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, we're all getting raises. We're all going to get a raise. Grab a microphone. Grab a microphone. Just take it off and keep it with you. Is it on? Yeah, turn it on.
I'm sure you can find some of that last group.
I can find lots of them. I got a whole crew of them. No, I'm joking. So, all that for that joke. Okay. It was worth it, he says. Comedic timing, Ron has it nailed. Okay. So you're looking up and it's like, what? And then the next group that came that only worked 3 hours, they get paid a penny. And then the ones that work 6 hours get paid a penny. And the ones that work 9 hours get paid a penny. By now, if you're Leanne and you work 12 hours, it's probably starting to dawn on you, not getting a raise. The ones who work the whole day get up there and he pays them a penny. Now, be honest. How many people would be offended at that? If you're the one, I'm in the 1 hour group. I'm not offended at all, right? But all you good hard workers, you diligent people who work 12 hours, is that offensive? Christ doesn't care. He doesn't care at all if you're offended at that. How much did you agree to work for? You agreed to work for a penny. Did you get a penny? Were you happy with a penny before you were envious of somebody who got it for less? You were. So really what it is it's the socialism coming out in you. I told you I could prove you're all socialists. Oh, it's that envy coming out in us. It's that innate sense of American fairness. You realize that many languages, perhaps most, I don't know, but many languages do not have a word for fair. Did you know that? Spanish doesn't. No word for fair. That's a very American concept, very English concept. I'm not saying no one else understands it. I'm just saying they don't have a word for it. Many, many languages don't have a word for it. They use the word of right or just to describe fairness, which isn't the same thing. Not at all. What's that? That's not fair. That's just. It's the same word for justice. So when they say something's not justo, it means something's not just. But it can be just, but not fair. Was the Lord in the parable just? Did he do anything wrong? No. He did nothing wrong. He paid the people he had contracted with exactly what he had contracted with them, and he paid the ones he had an open-ended contract with more than they could have possibly earned anywhere else. Not a single person could have taken him to court and said, "This man stiffed me." Not the ones under contract, not the ones who were freelancing. They all got paid at least what they agreed to get paid. Not one person could have said, "He told me I was going to go work 6 hours and he was going to pay me what was fair, what was right, and I got there and he paid me less than a half a day's wages." They all got paid more than they could have possibly hoped to get, except for the first ones. Now, we could look at this and analyze this for a long time, but the short of this story is, and this is how Christ ends it when the Lord of the parable replies and he tells them, "Your eye is evil because I'm good. I gave you what we agreed on." Right? I gave you what we agreed on. And you're not mad because you didn't get what was right. You're mad because someone else got more. I was generous, I was good, and that offends you because you don't like who got it. You understand that's what he's saying is the offense of the kingdom? Mercy is the offense. Do you realize how offensive mercy is? Particularly when you're not the one receiving it. So you, your whole life, when you were a tiny child, believed on the gospel. And your whole life you have strived to be a good Christian. And then someone stands up in your church and tells you that you don't love Jesus as much as somebody who didn't do all that good work. And that offends you. That hurts your feelings. Why? Why? Well, the same reason these people are offended. Same reason. Somebody was getting something they didn't deserve. That offends you. It offends me. I don't like it. I want a kingdom that's fair. I think the people that work 6 hours should get paid no more than half a day's wages. Probably ought to be prorated a little less. That's not how the kingdom of Christ works. In the kingdom of Christ, he's saying, "I am the Lord of the kingdom, and I will distribute my goods as I see fit. And I'll do nobody wrong, and I'm going to do some people really good. Some people are going to get a really good end of that stick, and some people are going to get just what I promised them, no more." And if that offends you, you're going to hate the kingdom. You're going to hate it. All right, let's look at another one. Let's look at Luke chapter 16. Or Luke chapter 15, sorry. Let's look at Luke chapter 15. Here we have the parable of the prodigal son. All right, first let's just, I know I beat this a lot, and some of you who actually really pay attention to me, the 2 or 3 that do, then you probably have heard this a lot, and you're going to be like, why are you saying this again? But I know that I've also talked to people that I've said this a lot to, and they don't remember, so I'm going to repeat it, all right? Very simply, this is not 3 parables. I know this is how it's taught. It's not 3 parables. Please stop saying that. It's one parable. It's the parable of the frugal brother, or if you want to call it misnomer, the prodigal son, if you prefer that. But it's the parable of these 2 brothers. That's the parable. The sheep and the coin are not parables. They're not parables. Christ is setting them up for the parable. Okay? He has this issue that's arose. He's dealing with the prostitutes and the publicans. They're getting saved. They're believing. He's communing with them. He's fellowshipping with them. He's ministering to them. And the Pharisees, again, have a problem with that. And so Christ wants to tell them a parable that will illustrate the source of their problem, what their problem really is. To do that, he wants to prepare them to receive this parable. So he sets them up. And he says, Basically, in paraphrase, he says, most of you men are shepherds, right? You got sheep. Okay, which one of you, if you had 100 sheep and one got lost, you wouldn't leave the 99 and you'd go find that sheep. And when you found that lost sheep, you'd bring him back and you'd be more happy about one that you lost and found than the 99 that were never lost. You wouldn't go around talking about your 99 very smart sheep who didn't get lost. But you would call everybody you know and say, hey, I had a sheep that got lost, a real stupid one, and I found him, and I got him back. You wouldn't believe where I found the sheep, but I found him and I brought him back. You'd be so happy about that, right? And they're like, yeah. I mean, think how happy you are when you lose one of your crazy little dogs or little whatever it is, pet you have, right? And you go search the whole neighborhood and you find him. To me, it's like good riddance. Why do people, I know I got to get on dogs. Why do people want to have, they say that they're their best friend. I don't want to be your best friend. You chain them up. You beat them when they try to run away from you. I don't know about that. I don't want to be your friend. If that's the way, it's like, keep them in, don't let them out. Because they're my best friend and he wants to get away from me. You're pathetic. Okay. Away from dogs. If you lose your little dog, you're going to look all over for him. And when you find them, you're going to be more happy about one dog you found than 99 dogs that never have left the house. That's true. Here's another example he says. How about this? You have 10 coins. You have 10 coins. You lose a coin. You lose 1/10 of all your wealth. Oh, now we're talking. See, I got your attention now. You're like, oh, okay. And you look and you look and you find it. How many of you have gotten so happy because you found a $10 bill in the street? Just so happy. You could have hundreds of them in your pocket, but you find a 10, you're like, and you won't talk about, hey, I have all these $100 bills. No, it's, hey, you know what? I was walking down the street and I found this money. Can you believe it? I was walking down the beach and I found this coin. It's so amazing. Okay. Having established that baseline of human behavior, let me tell you a story, he says, and this is the parable. A man had 2 sons. Now, you notice the progression. He went from 100 sheep to 10 coins to 2 sons. A man has 2 sons, and one of them is lost. And he finds him. And when he finds him, he's very happy. Super happy. But the other son, the brother, he's not happy because he doesn't seem fair. He's so happy about this son who went away and was with harlots and with all kinds of horrible people, and he was around them, and he was just and he was living with them, he was eating with the pigs, and now you're happy? He spent half of the inheritance and you're happy? I've been with you my whole life. I've never done anything wrong. I've served you my whole life. I've increased the family holdings, not decreased them. I've protected them, not squandered them. Why aren't you ever happy for me? Does that seem fair to you? Doesn't seem fair to me. Seems like somebody who got saved when they were very little and lived their whole life well and did a good job and tried their hardest to not have any regrets. That ought to be the person that we should celebrate. Why do we celebrate these people who've lived their whole life wrong and then they repent later on in years when they're already old? Maybe even they're very old and they're almost useless. And everyone's so happy, so excited. Doesn't seem fair. That's the parable. Now, what are you going to say? You just got done confessing that if it were a dog, you'd be happy. You just got done confessing that if it were a dollar bill, you'd be happy. But when it's your own brother, not happy. Think maybe there's something wrong in your heart? Think maybe Christ is pointing out that what might be fair in this world is wickedness in the kingdom? That maybe fairness is not the total sum of righteousness? Maybe fairness is highly overrated? See, in the first two, in the two stories he sets up, the sheep and with the coin, where he sets them up, he changes the roles. And this is something where Christ is really masterful at in some of his parables. I mean, he does this with tremendous mastery, where he substitutes the roles with tremendous effect. He does this amazingly with the Good Samaritan. Right? He's like, who is my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? Who am I supposed to help? And so Jesus, what does he do? He reverses the roles and says, a Jew is attacked and left for dead. And a Samaritan helps him. Who's his neighbor? That's a hard one. Oh, that's a hard one. Again, we see that the problem that Christ is pointing out is in our hearts. It is our normal human behavior patterns that are the problem. So he inverts the roles. The people that he's talking to in Luke 15, when he talks about the sheep and the coin, what role corresponds to them from the parable of the two sons? Exactly. They're the father. They're the father of the sheep. They're the father of the coin. See, it's easy to understand the joy of the father if you're a father, right? If you're in that role in your life, then you can understand why a parent would be so excited if a wayward child were to repent. Right? If you're a father, you understand that. But when you're thinking as a brother or a sister, not so much. They understood the coin and the sheep because they're the father in that role. But they didn't want to apply that then to the issue at hand. Understanding that these people who had destroyed their own lives, had lived terribly, had no excuse, and Christ makes no excuse for them ever. Ever did he make any excuse. He never talked about how hard they had it, how financially challenged they might have been, how they had, some type of underprivilege problem. He never makes any excuses for them. And yet you could understand, they could not understand, that these people who were so underprivileged in the eyes of many, who had willfully committed terrible sin, they had a father. And that father cared about them. And that care and that concern of the father was going to manifest itself in ways that to you will seem unfair. You'll say, well, then I should have just lived my life that way and squandered my half of the money having fun, and then everybody would be making a party for me. You're not going to like the kingdom. The kingdom is going to be full of all kinds of offenses. If this offends you, you're going to be offended. Because Christ has no intention whatsoever of mitigating this offense. He's not going to reorder the kingdom because we're going to have like a petition. We're going to lobby everybody to go vote that we don't like it. Not going to happen. He's going to establish the kingdom in his perfect righteousness. He already knows exactly how it's going to be. He tells these stories in the Gospels. He gives his teachings and doctrines on this issue in the Gospel so that you can get yourself ready for it. You know what many of us are going to find out when we get to the kingdom? We're last. And we're not going to get near the attention we thought we were going to get. And we weren't going to be near the focus we hoped we would be. Let's look at another one. Same book, next chapter, Luke 16. And we'll start reading in verse 1. And he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man, which had a steward. And the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. So he's not a very competent steward. And he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. To beg, I'm ashamed. I'm resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, how much owest thou unto my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, take thy bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. Then said he to another, and how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said, take thy bill and write 80. And the Lord commended the unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. You know this one really bothers people. There are people that really don't like this parable, because it's tough. It's tough. You're like, what? That's crazy. Jesus is commending the unjust steward? Well, first off, no, not exactly. The Lord in the parable is commending the unjust steward. It's not, I know it's nuance, but it is a distinction that matters. It is a distinction that matters. But in the end, then we would have to say, in a sense, yes, Jesus is commending him. And you think, well, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That is offensive. Yeah, you're not going to like the kingdom. Not going to like it at all. Things are not the way you thought. You know what? This merits a whole session of exposition, which maybe we should do. So I don't want to get too much into it because we won't do a service. However, I want you to notice the obvious moral of the story. Put aside any misgivings you have as to what every element of the parable means, and just look at the obvious moral of the story, which is the lament of Christ. That Christians are stupid. That's my paraphrase. See, if you had the Freeborn Bible, it actually, no, I'm joking. It doesn't say that. That's a joke. It doesn't say that. He says, the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. That's the lament of Christ. That Christians are not too bright. That offends you, that he thinks that of you? That he actually laments that you're not very bright? That you're not very wise? That's what he thinks. He thinks people in the world are a lot wiser in their things than you are in your things. In their lane, they run fast. In your lane, you run slow. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. You want to know why Christianity, in my opinion, is losing on almost every metric? Because we're not very wise. We got a lot of Christians who aren't very knowledgeable about almost anything, who believe it's some mark of spirituality to be an ignoramus. It isn't. It is not spirituality. Who believe it's spirituality to be bankrupt, financially. It's not. That is not spirituality. Who believe it's some mark of spirituality to be uninformed and uneducated. It's not. And it's a shame that the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. How is it that blind people living in darkness see better than seeing people who live in light? Now explain that to me. Blind people living in darkness see clearer than people who can see who live in light. That is just wrong. That should be what's offensive to you. It should be offensive to you that that can be said of Christianity. Ill-informed, poorly educated, financially illiterates, spiritual nincompoops. They don't even understand, many of them, the very book they believe. Does that offend you? It offends Christ. So much so that he told this parable that just shatters everyone's view of Christ. I mean, everybody has trouble with this. You ought to see the contortions people go through to try to make this not say what it says. Yes, it is offensive. All right, let's look at one more. This one I think is particularly interesting. If I haven't offended you yet, then maybe this will do it. Maybe this one is the ticket. We're going to look at Mark 11:11. Okay. And Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple. Wait, where am I at? Am I in the right place? Okay, I'm in the right place. Okay. He entered in Jerusalem into the temple, and he looked around about upon all things, and now the eventide was come. He went out unto Bethany with the 12, and on the morrow, on the next morning, when they were come from Bethany, he's back on his way. He went into Jerusalem. He surveys the place so he can know what he needs to do the next day. He's doing a little, reconnaissance, and then he leaves. He goes to where they're staying, and then he get up in the morning, and they're on their way back, and when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. He hasn't eaten. And he sees a fig tree afar off having leaves. So there he's hungry, and he sees a fig tree, and the fig tree has leaves. And he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves. For the time of figs was not yet. Now, what does he do? He curses the tree. He curses it. He kills it. He kills the tree. Because the tree didn't have fruit because it wasn't fruit season. Now, you do realize he's not just talking about trees here, right? But can you imagine this? You're with Christ, and you know when harvest is. You know when fig trees have figs. It's not in the winter. It's not in the early spring. That's not when this happens. There's a time. It's in the fall. That's when we're going to have figs. Christ comes out of season. He gets to this tree. The tree has no figs, so he kills it. And you think, whoa, that's offensive. What did the tree do to you? You made the tree. Why would you be upset at the tree for not having fruit when you made the tree not have fruit at this time? Kills it. You know what he's illustrating here? He's illustrating the admonition that he gives many times in the Gospels. You better watch and pray, for you know not when the Lord cometh. And if he comes and you're not ready, if you don't have oil in your lamp, if your lamps aren't trimmed, if you're not awake and at the gate, it will not go well for you. It doesn't matter if I come when you're not ready. It does not matter if it isn't time for the fig tree to have figs. When the Lord comes to the fig tree better have figs. It is not the Lord's duty to come at the time when it's convenient for the fig tree. It's the fig tree's duty to have figs when the Lord comes. Israel was not ready for Christ at that time. This is what he's illustrating with this narrative. Israel, when Christ came, they were not ready for him. We're not ready. They did not understand the time of their visitation, it says. It didn't matter. It was their job to be ready. It was their responsibility to be ready. And you know what he's told the church? I'm coming back. And there's going to be many of you not ready. You're not going to be ready. I'm warning you now. I am going to come, he says, when you're least ready, when it's least convenient for you. I'm not coming at your convenience. I'm coming at my good pleasure. And you better be ready. I want you all standing out at the gate. I want you all having your lamps full of oil with the wicks trimmed, and I want you ready. It may be in the morning, it may be in the afternoon. He says the day and the hour no man knows. So you better be ready. Better stop listening to the prophecy preachers telling you what year the Lord's coming back. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know. He could come today. He could come tomorrow. He could come in 13 generations from hence. I have no idea, no clue whatsoever. But we better be ready, because he won't accept any excuses. No excuses. Does that offend you? That he could come when it's not the time? The least convenient time in your life? And just expect you to be ready? You know, human beings, and we used to dress to be ready to receive visitors. Now you go to people's houses and they barely have any clothes on. They're walking around in their boxer shorts, maybe. Used to be, when you got up in the morning, you got dressed. Men wore suits and women wore dresses and heels, and they weren't going anywhere and they weren't expecting it. But you never knew, right? You never knew if the preacher was going to show up. You certainly wanted to be ready. Well, there's a whole lot more we could look at of these. Paul says in Romans 9, he quotes a passage in Romans 9, verse 32. He quotes a text. (9:32). He says, "Wherefore, because they sought it not by faith, but as it were by works for the law, for they stumbled at the stumbling stone, as it is written, Behold, I lay in Sion a stumbling stone, a rock of offense, and whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed." That's what he's putting in Zion. He says, I am putting a rock of offense. People are tripping, and you say, well, why are people tripping in the gospel? The gospel is designed to make you trip. It is designed to offend you. And blessed are those who are not offended in him. Blessed are those who take their lumps and believe. Well, we got to stop there. All right. Thank you. We will continue at 11.